Hi, my name is Mary Malone of Coldwell Banker Realty and the Luxe Service Group. I am here today with Anju Jessani, and Anju is the owner of Divorce with Dignity Mediation Services. Anju, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me as a guest, Mary. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course. So I am going to throw it out there that I know Anju because I did use your services years ago. And Anju, you were life-changing for me. And I appreciated the way that you were able to bring me through a time in my life in which there was the fear of the unknown. And one of it was with our marital residence. And that's why I'm going to you today to talk a little bit about real estate and getting divorced. What guidance do you give your clients when it comes to the sale of their home when they have decided they will be getting a divorce?
So first of all, Mary, thank you for outing yourself and saying you were my client. I would never ask anyone to do that, but I appreciate it. And I appreciated you had a good experience. And so for most clients, they have a marital home and they have really a couple of choices in a divorce. One can buy the other out. Right? They can sell the home or they can continue to co-own it in some fashion. And my number one tip for someone who wants to keep the home is if you wouldn't buy that house today, don't do a buyout. Because if that house is too big or it's too big a bite in your budget, you shouldn't be owning that house. And that's the biggest mistake I see women make in a divorce. This is the marital home. This is where they had their children. This is where their children have experienced life and they don't want to sell the home. And then they end up having it be unaffordable. And when they want to sell, it may not be the right time.
So when a divorcing couple is selling their home, what do realtors need to know? I don't know what to ask a divorced couple. When I'm going to their home, they're interviewing me. I could use some great guidance of how should we approach the subject of selling your home if you're getting divorced.
So a lot of it depends on where they are in the divorce mediation process or the divorce litigation process. If they're at the beginning, they may both be talking about keeping the home. And in that situation, I would recommend they go to mediation to figure out what they really want to do. Who's going to do the buyout? What's the value of the home? Do they need to refinance the mortgage? If they already have a marital settlement agreement, it's then looking at what the marital settlement agreement says, because it may say they've agreed to list the house with Mary for a listing price of $500,000 by Memorial Day. And if the house hasn't sold within a month, they agreed to use Mary's recommendation on reducing the price of the home and to continue to market it till it's sold. So you have to know what their agreement says. If they have an agreement, and if they don't have an agreement, I think it's better that they work with attorneys or mediators or both to figure out what they want their legal agreement to say, and including, the fact that they're going to be able to put a key box on the house. Okay. And what are what's the date for that? And what are the restrictions on when the house can be shown? Especially if one person wants to keep the house, it feels like you're dragging your feet getting it done. So you really need it in writing, and there has to be some teeth in the agreement that if one person doesn't comply, well, what happens?
You would suggest to me as a real estate professional to make sure everything's in writing prior to the house going on the market in terms of list price reduction, to times that buyers can come through the property. You think that's a really good idea to make sure that's all in writing?
The higher the conflict, the more detail you want in that agreement. And the first detail is, who are you going to list it with, right? Because people say, oh, no, you're friends with the realtor or you're in cahoots with the realtor. So it is better, first of all, to agree on who's going to be the agent. And that's the starting point. And maybe it's not the wife's best friend or the husband's drinking buddy. Maybe it is someone that neither of them knows very well, who they perceive as a neutral.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. Although most real estate agents, I will have to say, they are extremely ethical. We do try to remain neutral. We are advisors, but I do understand when emotions get involved, it can get a little sticky, and it's probably best to hire somebody who is a neutral party.
Oh, Mary, I agree with that. You're a licensed profession. You have a code of ethics you have to adhere to. It's more the perception of the couple getting divorced. The one says black, the other says white. So it is not in any way trying to denigrate your profession at all.
Buying a house, selling a house is supposedly the third most life stressful event behind death and divorce. And if you're divorcing and selling a house, which is number three, I can see how that can be an extremely stressful process. And it's probably best to make sure that everyone remains neutral or is perceived as being neutral parties.
And then you add moving to that list. And now you've really got the whammy of all the top stresses. I think on that list is they don't even put death of a child because it is just beyond the stress level. But I think divorce is higher than death in stress, just so you know.
So what's going on with divorces and specifically the marital residence in June of 2025?
That's a great question. And it's a challenge because usually when you do a buyout, so long as you qualify for the loan, you can refinance the house. But what people are finding is that with the mortgage rates, and they're really not that high compared to the 1980s, but you're still looking at 7.5% mortgage rates where people have 3% mortgages right now. So many of my agreements are saying that as long as the person who's buying the other out makes timely payments, the other person's name can remain on the mortgage for X period of time. And X period of time varies quite greatly depending on whether the other person wants to buy a home, the ages of the kids, and so forth. But that's what's happening in June 2025. Refinancing is very expensive.
I feel part of your services is actually to try and help us as couples who are divorcing to be more financially responsible because we're going to you instead of litigating with attorneys and spending all of our money with the attorneys. Working with you helps us to come to a resolution. It actually helps to save a few dollars as well. Do you agree with that?
So the reason people should go to mediation is because they're the problem solvers, right? It's their problem to solve. The attorneys can't solve the problem. And so by having a guide, they have someone who's been through it before, like a tour guide, right? You go to a new city, and if you have a tour guide, you know where the safe streets are, where it's unsafe, what the top 10 sites are. So with working with a mediator who knows about real estate, and we get training in real estate, so it's not that we're coming to the table without knowledge, you're going to get a better result. And my job is to create options. If the kid, if your youngest kid is 2 years away from graduating from high school and you want to keep them in the school district, you can own the home together for 2 years, right? That's not going to be burdensome for 2 years. There's an end date to it. If the child is in fourth grade, that's a long time to own real estate together. So a lot of it depends, but we're here to create options, not to tell clients what to do.
And what did you say about attorneys, Anju? When you're with attorneys, they're not there to solve problems.
The attorneys aren't really looking at options, oftentimes because their job is to vigorously advocate for their client. They're not looking at the total win-win for the couple. Some are, and I think, one of the areas that's growing is collaborative law, where the attorneys work together. But often what I see is the attorney has really no interest in the spouse, right? They're interested in their client. And so they're not looking at problems that may be a win-win for both people. They're going to look at, what's the risk if I'm, the husband and I'm leaving the marital residence of the wife not paying the mortgage? What happens if this happens? What happens if she doesn't upkeep the home? And there's a lot of all the things that can go wrong, not the things that can go right, like the kids are going to be able to graduate from that high school that they want. They don't have to switch houses. I mean, divorce is stressful enough, and to have your children move at the same time may be challenging. I even tell my clients, even if you are planning to sell the home, sometimes there's a benefit to keeping it another year, just so that your children aren't going through those two stress points at the same time, right? The shock of their parents' divorce, and now they're looking at moving. So sometimes that can be great. Sometimes it's like the kids are waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you might as well just get everything done. Every situation is different.
How do divorce mediators work with their clients differently than divorce attorneys to address real estate issues?
my role as the mediator is to meet with the clients together and to facilitate a resolution. And facilitate means I'm not making the decisions, I'm guiding the process. So I am from the start, and most of my clients actually are living in the same house when they start the mediation process, right? They're usually living in the marital residence, and they're still kind of going back and forth on what do we want to do with the home? What is it really worth? And I tell them, get 3 realtors to give you an approximate value or get an appraisal so that you know what you're dealing with. What's the value of the mortgage? How much do you owe? Some mortgages are assumable, so that's really the best. If you can assume the 3% mortgage,
Oh, yes.
spot, right? So is the mortgage assumable? Call your bank and find out early. Because if that's the case, and one of you can hold on to the home, that's golden.
So, what does success look like when it comes to addressing the marital residence in a divorce?
First, let me tell you what success looks like in general in divorce, which is when you can sit next to your spouse at a graduation, a wedding, when you can visit your grandchildren together in the hospital when they're born. That's success. And success in real estate is, first of all, that you get top dollar for your home. People know that a house is being sold because of a divorce. A lot of times buyers will think, oh, it's a fire sale. And so to the extent that you don't present that you're desperate, that the house has to be sold, that the sellers are at war with each other, you can get top dollar if you're selling it. And if you're doing a buyout, you come up with a fair and reasonable price. Of course, the person being bought out wants the house to value for high amount. The person who's doing the buyout wants the lower amount. And in New Jersey, we don't reduce the buyout by the selling costs of the home, the commission. So that's a surprise to some clients to find that out, right? So if the house is 500, it's 500 less the mortgage of 250. The equity in the home is 250. So either you split that or the person keeping the house has to pay that to the other person. But whatever it is, that the idea is that it's really just a net of the selling price less the mortgage.
If you were giving a divorce or soon to be divorced couple, and it's a contentious relationship, the judge has now assigned their sale, the listing of the sale of their home to a real estate agent. Usually that happens, correct, because both sides are not meeting of the minds, because both sides are not getting along. So it's gotten to the point where a judge has now assigned a real estate agent. What would your advice be to that couple to try and get that house sold?
That's not an unusual situation. And I've been in that situation as I was guardian for someone who was residing in the home, didn't really want the home to be sold. So it was very hard. And we ended up having to file a motion to get the house listed. So my advice to those people is get therapy, because this is a loss. They're feeling the loss of the home. And sometimes it's a budget issue. A lot of times in a divorce situation, the payor, usually the husband, is picking up all the expenses on the home. So the person staying in the home says, why don't I keep the status quo? Basically, it's getting paid for now. Once the house is sold, I'm going to get support, but it's not going to be as much as when we had the marital home together. So it is, in a sense, creating an optimism. There are divorce coaches out there for people as well, and they can be helpful. But really, I think if you can create an optimism about the future, then a person can let go of the past, because the past isn't that great, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here now.
Anju, if somebody is interested in setting up a meeting with you, do you have an office in Clinton? Do you have 2 offices?
So I have offices in Clinton because I live in Warren County in Powhatan, very rural community. And I have an office in Hoboken. I used to live in Jersey City some 25 years ago. And the first year I said, I can commute. The second year I can commute. And then I just kept commuting. And so I love to go to Hoboken, get a good meal. It's a very different demographic in Hoboken than in Clinton. But I love both the offices, and I see clients on the web through Zoom as well. In fact, at this point, I would say 60% of my practice is over Zoom.
And tell me what your website is if somebody wants to learn a little bit more about your services.
So my website is www.dignitymediationservices.com. D as in David, W as in window, D as in David, mediation.org. Honestly, if you just put Anju and divorce in, you'll find me. I've got a ton of stuff on the web, lots of good videos, good articles.
And Anju, I'm assuming your telephone number is on your website as well. Is that the best way to get a hold of you?
Whatever way you want to contact me, you can phone me, you can text me, you can email me. I'm available. And of course, I do want to put a plug in for Mary, who is a really good realtor. She is working 24/7 for her clients. And so this is not a hobby. You are a go-getter, and you are, a key person in the Hunterdon area.
I appreciate that. Don't forget to follow me on YouTube and like and subscribe to our channel. Reach out anytime with questions. Thanks so much.